Recording on audio tracks can be a little bit tricky, and that's because everybody's audio interface interacts with Cubase or any DAW program a little bit differently. So I'm going to show you some of the things that you may need to check on to make sure that you're able to use all of the inputs on your audio interface and that you'll be able to hear them during the recording. Let's go ahead and add one audio track to our project, and you can see that I've changed some of the track colors and I've actually recorded new parts because I wanted to make this audio track sound like it's cohesive with these other tracks. So I've added a piano and a synth bass and a choir sound, and that choir comes out of the sampler track. So I'm going to add a fretless bass part to that particular project. So let's right or control click in the track list and choose Add Audio Track. And there's some settings here that are going to determine if you'll be able to record from the proper input or not. On the Audio Inputs window right here, if you drop that down, then you'll see all of the audio inputs that your audio interface has available. I'm going to choose the first analog input of my audio interface. And then on the configuration, I'm going to choose mono. The audio output is going to go to the stereo output, and I'm going to call this FL bass for fretless bass. And then click on the Add Track button. It's just going to add that one track. I'm going to colorize that track red because all of my bass tracks are always red. And now let's check if we have access to all of our inputs. Let's go to the Studio pull-down menu and choose Audio Connections. You can see that we have on the Inputs tab here the stereo input of our audio interface, and stereo inputs are always configured with a left input and a right input, so that you can record on a mono track from either the left or right input from a stereo input, or in my particular case, by choosing the mono input from that Add Track dialog box, it created a mono input for me, which is also coming from the first input of my audio interface. But I could change that to any other audio input that I wanted to, but I am going to leave it on the first analog input. Then I'm going to close that window. I'm going to select that track, and again, you have to think about sources and destinations. We already have those configured in the Add Track dialog box, but you can change them over here in the Object Inspector as well. You can change the input and the output destination here. But now comes the tricky part, because some audio interfaces will require you to load their own proprietary control panel program outside of Cubase so that you can configure the monitoring of the recording. Whereas since I have a Steinberg interface, I can come to the Studio pull-down menu here and go to Studio Setup, and I'm going to click on whatever appears underneath Audio System here. And I'm going to make sure that this little checkbox next to Direct Monitoring is on. That will allow me to monitor the input of my audio interface directly so that there isn't any latency between when I record and when I hear it coming out of my headphones or my studio monitors. If you hear a doubling when you're recording an audio track, you may need to turn Direct Monitoring off. But always consult with the owner's manual for your audio interface to see how to set up the monitoring in that interface and how that interface interacts with Cubase. So with Direct Monitoring on, I'm going to click on OK. Then I'm going to Record Enable it, and you'll notice that when I do, this little speaker icon next to the Record Enable button lights up. That's the monitor button. That monitor button allows me to hear while I'm playing. And now I'm going to play some notes on my trusty bass guitar. Got a nice signal going in, but I'm thinking that these other tracks are probably going to be much louder than the bass track is going to be. So before I start recording, I'm going to come down to the mix console and I'm going to turn all the other tracks down quite a bit so I can really zero in on this new bass track that I'm going to record. So let's turn down Halion Sonic here. So now all of the other tracks are turned down, but my bass track is turned up. Let's go ahead and record this track. And now let's play that back and hear how it sounds in the mix. And I just realized this is kind of sounding like a musical interlude on a new age radio station or a computer startup sound. But now that I've got those tracks recorded, in the next section, let's talk about the transport and metronome.